Father kills his 3 daughters, then vanishes. Is Travis Decker dead or still out there? That morning began like any other. 3 little girls climbed into their father's truck, ready for what was supposed to be a fun weekend camping trip. They brought backpacks, stuffed animals, and a few changes of clothes their mother had packed the night before. It was meant to be a rare, joyful time between a father and his daughters. No one knew it would be the last time sunlight would ever touch those girls again. A few days later, their bodies were found, curled up beside the very truck that had taken them away. And the only suspect? Travis Decker, their biological father. A former soldier, now a fugitive. In the wake of this unspeakable crime, Travis disappeared, as if swallowed by the forest. No trail, no note, nothing. Across America, shock turned to horror. The killer didn't come from the shadows. He came from the arms the girls had once trusted most. Today I'm going to walk you through the heartbreaking and mind-bending story of the Decker sisters, a case that has outraged, terrified, and haunted a nation still asking the same gut-wrenching question: why didn't someone stop this? Before it was too late. That day began like any other. Paityn, 9 years old, was the oldest of the 3 sisters. She was bright, always smiling, the kind of kid everyone instantly adored. But what made Paityn truly special was her fierce protective instinct, especially when it came to her younger sisters. If one of them cried, Paityn was the first to comfort them. If anyone dared to bully them, she stood in the way. Evelyn, 8, was the quiet middle child, gentle, introspective, and the artistic soul of the trio. She loved to draw. The walls at home were once covered in her colorful creations. People called her the little girl with the tender heart. She often whispered fairy tales she made up to her youngest sister, Olivia. Olivia, just 5 years old, was the baby, cherished by both sisters like a fragile crystal. The 3 of them could spend hours in the yard, building blanket forts, drawing treasure maps, and pretending to go on wild adventures across the world. And one day, that adventure became real, but in the worst possible way. On Friday morning, May 30th, their father, Travis Decker, picked them up for a weekend camping trip. It was the first time he'd been granted visitation after months of a tense custody battle. Whitney, the girl's mother, reluctantly agreed, even though her gut screamed not to. She had reported his erratic, paranoid behavior many times before, but the court still allowed him visitation rights. He's a former soldier, Whitney later said. He knows how to make people think he's fine. And so, the girls went. Before getting in the car, Paityn leaned in and whispered to her mother, "I'll take care of the little ones, Mom. Don't worry." Travis was supposed to bring them back by 8 p.m. on Saturday, May 31st. But the sun went down, and the truck never came back. By 10 p.m., her heart tightening with fear, Whitney called the police. No one, not even she, could have known that she was standing at the edge, between a mother's worst anxiety and a horror that would shake the entire nation. As soon as Whitney reported her daughters missing, authorities in Washington State and Chelan County Sheriff's Office launched an immediate, full-scale search. They didn't waste a minute. 9 units were deployed. Drones swept across rugged mountain trails. Helicopters scanned remote forests. And teams fanned out across every campground Travis had ever taken girls to. A warrant was issued almost immediately. Travis Decker, once known as a military veteran with survival training, was now considered a dangerous fugitive. Authorities warned the public, do not approach him under any circumstances. Photos of Travis and his 3 daughters flooded every news outlet, every social media platform, a collective cry for help that echoed across the country. People held their breath, hoping for a miracle. Then, after days of high anxiety, a lead came in. Intel suggested Travis and the girls might be in the Rock Island Campground, an isolated, heavily wooded area deep in Chelan County. On Sunday afternoon, June 2, 2025, law enforcement converged on the area. It didn't take long for them to find Travis's white pickup truck parked quietly at the edge of the site. Nearby, they discovered bloodstains and a scattering of personal items, a blanket, half-eaten food, car seats, and a child's wallet. The air turned ice-cold, as if the woods themselves were bracing for what came next. At exactly 3:45 p.m., they found the unthinkable. The bodies of Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia, bound at the wrists with zip ties, their heads covered in plastic bags, were discovered lying lifeless next to their father's vehicle. The initial cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, a brutal, suffocating death that sent a wave of horror and outrage through everyone who heard the news. Travis Decker, the primary suspect, was nowhere to be found. He had vanished, leaving behind a trail of blood and a mountain of unanswered questions. Cell phone data revealed that Travis had arrived at and left that very campground the day before the girls were reported missing. It was clear this wasn't a man who snapped. This was someone who planned and knew how to disappear. There's one thing you need to understand from the very beginning. Travis Decker was not an ordinary man. At 32 years old, he was a former soldier in the Washington National Guard, meaning he was trained to survive under the harshest conditions. And that detail, it's not just background. It matters. Travis had lost everything. His job, his home, his custody rights. One by one, the pieces that made up his identity, his role, his pride, his purpose, were stripped away. Once considered a pillar of strength, he became a shadow of a man, living out of a truck, drifting between cheap motels, remote campsites, and the deep woods. No one really knew where he was. And the truth is, no one really asked. The one thing that tethered him to life, the only thing left that still meant something, was his 3 daughters. But even that was slipping away. Travis was locked in a bitter custody battle with his ex-wife, Whitney Decker, the mother of the girls. The divorce hadn't just ended a marriage, it had torn something vital inside him apart. Court documents revealed that Whitney had repeatedly raised red flags about Travis's mental state. She described his behavior as unstable, paranoid, and increasingly alarming. Her sworn statements and interviews painted a picture of a man unraveling: depression, anxiety, obsessive messages. It was a warning bell, loud enough for any reasonable person to hear, but not loud enough, apparently, for the court. The system allowed a mentally unstable, unemployed, homeless man to have unsupervised access to his 3 young daughters. And on May 30th, 2025, Travis picked them up and never brought them back. He cut off all contact. He vanished, leaving behind a blood-stained truck and a single bone-chilling question: what did he do? And why? Now imagine this: a man with advanced survival skills pushed to the brink of psychological collapse, stripped of power, stripped of control, feeling the threat of losing the one role that still defined him, being a father. From that point on, his motive becomes clearer: a twisted, violent form of revenge, born from desperation and mental decay. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a psychological break left untreated, manifesting in the worst possible way. This was a man trained to be resilient, to endure, to survive. But in the end, Travis Decker collapsed under the weight of his own inner war and took 3 innocent lives with him in a tragedy the world will never be able to justify or forgive. The moment the bodies of the 3 young girls were found at Rock Island Campground, the case escalated from a personal tragedy to a nationwide manhunt. Travis Decker, the only suspect, was gone. No signs of a struggle. No screams. No witnesses. He had vanished, as if melting into the very wilderness he once trained to survive in. And that's what made everything worse. Washington state authorities, along with federal agencies, quickly issued a nationwide warrant. With his military background and survival training, Travis became one of the most difficult targets to pursue. If he didn't want to be found, he might never be. Law enforcement warned, "We don't know if he's armed, but we know he's dangerous." This wasn't hyperbole. This was how the U.S. government described a survivalist who had crossed a moral line. Chelan County Sheriff Mike Morrison appeared on television, pleading directly, "If you're hearing this, turn yourself in." But that kind of plea doesn't carry weight with someone like Travis. If he was capable of killing his 3 daughters, surrender was likely the last thing on his mind. A $20,000 reward was posted. But the truth is, America wasn't waiting for money. They were waiting for an answer. Why? Meanwhile, justice was frozen. Travis was a murderer on paper, but a living nightmare in real life, possibly hiding in a forest, sleeping in a cheap motel, or worse, living near someone who doesn't yet realize who he is. The charges were clear: 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of custodial interference, among the most serious charges in American criminal law. But all of it meant nothing until Travis Decker was caught. Somewhere else, Whitney Decker, the mother who lost all 3 of her children in a single day, stood in front of the cameras and demanded justice. But how do you find justice when the suspect still walks free? And even worse, every warning Whitney had ever given about Travis, his mental instability, his growing paranoia, the danger she sensed, had been brushed off by the courts. Dismissed as the overreactions of a stressed-out divorce mom. "They waited until my children were dead to believe me." That sentence hit like a knife to the heart for anyone who ever believed the system was built to protect families. When the bodies of those 3 little girls were found, it didn't just bring people to tears, it left them numb. 3 children who once sat safely in the back seat, clutching their teddy bears and asking, "When do we get to see Mommy again?" now lay lifeless in the woods, as if they had been betrayed by the very person who was supposed to protect them the most. And at that moment, a single question echoed across the country. How could a father do this to his own children? To understand that, you have to stop thinking like a normal person. You have to step inside the fractured, warped, and deeply wounded mind of Travis Decker. Let's be clear, Travis wasn't just any man. He was a former member of the Washington National Guard, not a weekend reservist, but part of a unit trained for rapid deployment, survival combat, and operating under extreme conditions. He was taught how to survive, how to react under pressure. But no one taught him how to reintegrate. No one prepared him for what happens when everything is taken away. Court records and testimony from his ex-wife, Whitney, suggest that Travis exhibited clear symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. He lost his job. He lost his home. He lost his children. And eventually, he lost all sense of control. He was no longer anyone's hero, not even his own. That's when the psychological breakdown began. The warning signs were all there. But what did the courts do? They didn't reevaluate his mental health. They didn't revoke visitation rights. They allowed him to continue seeing his daughters, unsupervised. And so on May 30th, 2025, he picked them up and never brought them back. Some experts believe Travis may have entered a psychological state known as distorted martyrdom. It's a place where love and control blur into something dangerous, where the logic becomes twisted. If I can't have my children, then no one can. But here's what makes it worse. Travis didn't take his own life. He didn't leave a note. He didn't stay with the bodies. He disappeared. And that fact has given even the most seasoned criminal profilers pause. If this was an act of pure despair, why did he plan an escape? Why cover the tracks? Why vanish with precision? Maybe this wasn't a loss of control. Maybe it was control in its darkest form. If that's true, then this isn't just a story of psychological collapse. It's a total failure of the systems that were supposed to catch it. Social monitoring, legal safeguards, mental health support, all failed, tragically, fatally. And while Travis hides somewhere in the wilderness, the nightmare continues for those he left behind. Whitney Decker, a mother who lost all 3 of her children in one day, now faces an even colder truth. She also lost her faith in the justice system. She begged the court to reevaluate Travis's mental state. She warned them that something was wrong. No one listened, until it was far too late. The public was stunned, not just by the murders, but by the sickening sense that this didn't have to happen. People began asking hard questions about how the system handles mentally unstable parents in custody battles. Hundreds of thousands of dollars poured into a GoFundMe. Strangers left messages of sorrow, of solidarity, of shared outrage. But for Whitney, the promises felt hollow, echoes of a society still riddled with blind spots. Criminal psychologist Dr. Catherine Ramsland once said of a similar case, when a parent kills their own children, it often comes from a combination of desperation and untreated mental illness. But it also reveals something darker, the terrifying unpredictability of those we once trusted the most. And a family court attorney put it even more bluntly, this is the most heartbreaking example of why courts must be far more cautious when granting custody or visitation to individuals with known mental health concerns. When the name Travis Decker hit the news, grief wasn't the only thing that spread. Doubt began to move like a virus. Reddit, Facebook, podcasts, spaces once reserved for casual commentary suddenly transformed into digital war rooms, amateur investigations unfolding in real time. And like Pandora's box kicked open in the dead of night, out poured conspiracy theories reeking of fear, but laced with disturbing logic. Theory 1. Travis didn't act alone. People immediately began to ask, how could one man single-handedly murder 3 children, hide the bodies, and vanish without a trace? Disposing of 3 bodies in a vast forest without leaving significant evidence isn't just violent, it's meticulous. Too many believe there had to be an accomplice, someone who helped, or at the very least, aided his escape. That theory might make sense if Travis were anyone else, but he wasn't. He had military training. He knew how to move without leaving tracks, how to cross streams without footprints, how to wrap bodies in biodegradable material, How to avoid thermal detection. No second DNA. No other vehicle. No helping hand. He did it alone. And somehow. That's the most terrifying part. Theory 2. Travis is already dead. The darker theory, colder, quieter, is that Travis didn't escape to run. He left the Rock Island campground to die. The Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest is massive. Remote. It's filled with deep ravines, hidden caves, and dense underbrush. As one local put it, if he knew how to survive out there, he knew how to die out there, without ever being found. Maybe that was his endgame, not justice, but permanent disappearance. Theory 3. This is a failure of the system. As the manhunt raged on, so did a new wave of anger online. Especially after Whitney Decker shared how she had warned the courts again and again about Travis's mental instability, and no one responded. The hashtag Justice for the Decker Girls began trending on X and Reddit. People called for investigations into judges, caseworkers, law enforcement, anyone who had a hand in allowing Travis access to his daughters. To many, this wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was systemic failure. And finally, the most controversial view of all, that Travis Decker wasn't just a monster, he was a man abandoned by the system himself. If he had gotten the help he needed in time, some argued, those girls might still be alive. Veterans stepped forward. They spoke about being ignored when asking for mental health care, waiting months just to get a call back, feeling invisible the moment they took off their uniforms. Maybe Travis wasn't born evil. Maybe he was a broken man, left alone with the demons that no one cared enough to confront. You may already know this, or maybe you don't. But Travis Decker isn't the first father to turn into a nightmare. In 2018, Chris Watts smiled on live TV before confessing to murdering his wife and 2 children. In 2012, Josh Powell, after losing custody of his sons, set his house on fire, killing himself and both boys inside. Both men were once seen as normal, until they had nothing left to lose. And in that twisted moment, they didn't just fall into darkness, they dragged the people they loved most down with them. So what do you think? Is Travis Decker still alive? Or did he disappear forever into the woods? Until he's found, or his death is confirmed, the truth remains buried, like a bone waiting to be unearthed. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you're drawn to strange, chilling, and almost unbelievable stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you in the next case.